Hey y'all, it's Sarah, and I'm doing a little personal crafting today, and it's something that I thought I'd share to see if anybody wanted to tag along. I'm getting ready to work on a gallery wall, and it's something that I've wanted to do, but I've been a little afraid to because I'm not a big fan of putting a lot of nail holes, wall anchors, and things like that into my walls just yet. Our home is still fairly new, and I'm trying to be really protective. So I wanted to be able to get that look. This is a great way to do it. I'm going to be doing several of these pieces and I'll be sure to share them all. But these are going to be really lightweight decor pieces that should work really good for a gallery wall. They would be absolutely cute on a shelf as filler pieces. And this particular one I think would even be cute in a kid's room. And it was inspired by a piece that I saw on Target's website. It's just a simple oversized domino. I'm customizing mine to fit my family. And you totally could do this in a kid's room. Maybe do two of them with their birthday. If they had, like, let's say their birthday was December 14th, you could always do one with a 1 and a 2 and then a 1 and a 4, and it would at least be a little meaningful. But I do think this is such a cute idea, and it can be customized to work with your home and your decor, either by color, and I'm going to go with a really dark vintage aged wood for mine. The Target one I saw was black and white. You could definitely go in and check out some of the other videos and decide which one would fit you the most. And I want to go ahead and get started because I'm pretty excited about doing this. So some of the things that I'm going to be using is my paints, obviously. These are pretty much the same ones I use most of the time, although you will be seeing some new ones brought in and new wood grains and that kind of thing added to my video list. So be looking for that. I'm going to be starting with the Waverly Wax in Clear, the Waverly Wax in Antique, and then the Waverly Chalk Paint in the color Ink. And if you hear me say black paint, this is what I'm referring to. I know that they call it ink. I just by habit call it black. And you see I have another bottle of paint here. This is just for me to trace. I've got just a scrap piece of contact paper. This is just Dollar Tree contact paper. I have my foam core that's already cut down into, it was like this. I cut it in half so that I could double layer mine and get a little more thickness to this, where it was slightly more dimensional off the wall. My pieces are about 7 by 12, so a pretty decent little size. You can definitely do it to whatever size fits, whatever size may work in the space that you're wanting to do on your gallery wall, which is really great because you can keep a nice scale, being able to customize your pieces as you go. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you kind of where to line up your dots, how to get your dots. For Cricut users, or other cutting machines, I'm sure there's other places to find that, to find SVGs for you guys. Cricut users specifically, if you go on the Cricut design space and look up domino tiles, they have it already set up in a file. All you have to do is just go in, click it, and adjust it to your size. But I wanted to show a method for everyone to be able to use, even if you don't have one of those machines. So a couple of things. I'm going to need a ruler. I'm going to need something to trace. This right here is about 1.5 inch circle, and that's about what I'm using for the scale of mine. You would pick something that would work for the scale of what you're working on if you go bigger or smaller. And you're just going to trace your dots, however many that you're going to need to fill out your domino, and just cut them out of this contact paper. Now I'm going to show you, this is absolutely the hardest part of this entire craft. And probably mainly for me because of my acrylic tips. So I've got my dots cut out. The hardest part of this is going to be peeling this off of here. Just so you know what you're getting yourself into. That is the worst part of this craft. So I've got my dots. I'm going to need some tape to tape off my line across. You could use painter's tape. I didn't have any painter's tape that was on the thin side, and I didn't want to cut it down uneven, so I'm just using washi tape. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my foam core and I'm going to find the center. And this is about 11 and a half, so it's 11 and a half by, I think it's 7. Yes. So I'm going to find my 3.5 mark. And it's going to be about 5 3/4 in the center. If you've watched my other videos, you know I'm not a huge fan of math and crafts. However, I will measure certain things out just to make sure they line up fairly decent. This one, because dominoes, the alignment on the dots typically run a certain way, I definitely kind of wanted to get close to that. So I've done my lines really light. Hopefully you can see I just did the center of both parts. Now each one of these is its own half, top and bottom. And I'm going to do 2 at the top to represent me and my husband. And I'm going to do the 3 at the bottom to represent our children. And in order to get that nice straight diagonal and have these sides line up, I'm going to show you real quick how to do that. So this bottom section where my 3 is going to go, I'm just going to go real lightly, super lightly, because we're going to have to erase these lines anyway before we put our stickers down. I'm just going to lightly mark that diagonal. And it's going to hit right here in this center of this bottom section, and it'll hit in the very center of this top section. So we'll know right where the middle of that is. And this will pretty much lay out where we're going to line this up. Now this works for me because I'm doing these particular numbers. You know, it may take something a little different setup for you to do the numbers that you choose. So I've got my little white eraser out. I've mentioned before, if you're using a color eraser, a lot of times it'll leave like a residue behind on this paper, which I don't necessarily like. So I always pull out a white eraser to erase on here. And this is the hardest part, guys. You'll see this is like the worst part of this entire craft. So I'm going to go ahead and unstick some of these, and I'm just going to stick them to the side of my worktop here so that they're ready. And then I'll show you how we're going to get the alignment down the side, and it's very simple too. I'm telling you, this is embarrassing that I struggle to peel stickers. And if you guys are on my Facebook page at Peppermint Cactus, most of you are already aware that I did not set out to do videos or anything of that sort. I'm literally just a crafter, and it started with some people wanting to know how I did certain things. So I still am just a crafter. I'm not a tech person, which shows in my videos, but the information is still good. I didn't set out to be a crafty instructor. It's just kind of worked out that way, and I'm sure that I'll improve as I go, I hope. And I'll learn about the tech side of things and all of the editing and that kind of thing. But for now, everybody's got to have a starting point, so you guys are starting off with me. Okay, got all my stickers done. The last place I want to mark is I'm just going to go over maybe about 1 inch. I do not like that yellow side of this. So 1 inch, 1/2 inch, however you want your kind of border to be. And I'm going to just barely mark where it hits that diagonal, just so I know that my circles are going to kind of start in this area. And I'm going to do it in the same alignment for this bottom one. Hitting that diagonal. And that way I know that there's a nice margin evenly around each side where my dots are. Like I said, we have to erase this so that it doesn't show up because we're doing kind of a reverse stenciling. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to set this dot. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm trying to make sure that it's flanking that line right about the middle. So before I stick that down entirely, I'm going to put my sticker down. You could use any kind of sticker. If you already have some round stickers that'll work for you, go ahead and use them. I like using the contact paper. It does peel off pretty easy. It applies pretty easy, and you get a lot of it in one sheet. So I'm going to go down here to this bottom one and do the same thing. Put in the edge of my dot right there, and I'm kind of lining it up on that, the center of that diagonal line. And then I can erase all the rest of these because we aren't going to need that now. So I'm going to go down to the bottom where my 3 are going to be. We're going to do the same thing. I'm hitting right here. I'm going to line this circle in halves on this line before I stick it down. I'll go ahead and knock that one off. I'm going to go down here and do the same thing. And then the center one will be pretty easy because I've got a couple lines marked there to know where that goes. So there's our alignment there. I'm not going to erase this fully. I'm lightening it up just enough where I can still kind of see. The other bonus to using this washi tape is it's got a design on it that runs pretty even. And it's really thin so I can see through it. So I can line it up even over that barely there line. I can line it up right in the middle of its own little design. As soon as I can see where I put it here. And I'm just gonna, I'm leaving a little extra just because it makes it easier for me to grab onto. And take out the rest of these little lines. Now, if you've seen me do this kind of reverse stenciling thing already, you'll know that my next step is going to be to take some of my clear wax and I'm going to seal these dots off. Now, I will tell you that the best way to get this to work is to do a couple layers of this along these, and you don't want to go too far out because it'll leave like a halo kind of ring around this. But you're just going to go in, I'm using just a Dollar Tree makeup sponge, and you're going to tap in that clear. And this is going to seal those edges off so that the only thing that was able to seep through is this clear paint, and none of our actual colors is going to be able to seep in. Now, mind you, it's probably not going to work out that way for me because I'm doing just one quick layer to show you. But do know that this is an amazing little hack to get some crisp, clean lines. Now, if you're doing the rustic one like I am, it's not necessary that my lines are really crisp, but it is a technique that I did want to show, especially for those that want to get images and wording on projects like this and don't have a vinyl cutting machine, or you don't use vinyl. This is a really, really effective way to get that look. And I'm just going to do each one, and I'm hoping my little fan will speed this up. And the reason I'm using my little fan, guys, and not using my heat gun is I can use my heat gun. I've played with this enough to know to be real, real careful. But I do want to tell you, you can use your heat gun with contact paper when you're applying contact paper on furniture pieces and things like that. And you can use a blow dryer or something like that to warm it up and activate the glue a little better. Its adhesive surface will activate and stick a little better. But there is a downfall to that when you're doing it with small cut pieces like this. That little bit of extra heat can absolutely make these things shrink up on you when they're small like this. So if you want to use your heat gun, my best suggestion is keep your hand close to it. If it gets too hot for your hand, it's going to be too hot for the foam that's inside of this, and it's going to be too hot for the contact paper. So keep your hand near it, and if it gets too hot, move it along. I don't like to direct my heat gun to it and not explain that to you guys, because these things can all shrink up, and this foam core, this foam right here can melt underneath that from the heat of a heat gun. Now, a blow dryer, you may not have that kind of problem with it. I don't think that they actually get hot enough. So I'm going to move this over to the side so that I can get my paints pulled closer to me. Hopefully that's had slightly enough time to dry. I'm going to start with my antique color. And let me get a little plate where I can show you guys just kind of how I blend my colors. I had a spill here, so now I'm trying to use that spill up. Let me adjust this. On this one, I want a really dark vintage wood look. I know you guys are used to seeing me start with a sponge, but I actually am going to start with my Dollar Tree chippy brush. And I like this brush because, one, these bristles, not as an insult, but these bristles are cheap. And they are wiry, and they leave a heavy, heavy grain while applying a lot more product than your sponge does. Now, I have recommended Walmart has a chippy brush version, Harbor Freight has a chippy brush version, and the one funny thing about those is that their bristles on their version are a nicer quality. So this will still give you graining, but it's going to give you a feathered graining, where this is going to give a heavy graining. And they each have their purpose, and they each have their own look. And I will use all of them at any given time to get a variety of grain looks on one project. Now, if you notice, I didn't do a lot of distressing on this, and here's why. I kind of wanted to see, I wanted to get a little better visual. I'm not going to put knot holes in this, and the reason being is I don't want them to conflict with the circles. So I'm going to put a little distressing just to give that vibe. So I just stabbed it with a tip of a pencil. And to add a little more distressing, I'm going to show you a couple things that I keep handy. You guys have probably seen me use this. This is just a popsicle stick. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to kind of dig that popsicle stick in. Now, I didn't push it hard enough to make it crack. I pushed it hard enough to make it rip directly in. And let's see. We'll go this way. You could use pretty much anything that's got maybe a little bit of thickness. and a flat surface that will dig into this. If you use something too flat and too sharp, you're just going to get like a cut mark, where these give a little bit of width to it, so that it looks less like it's been cut into and more like it's been actually damaged. So let's go in with a little more of this antique wax. Guys, I absolutely recommend using the wax with any paint product that you're going to put on here, any color. The wax helps this foam core take your paint product without causing a lot of damage, a lot of curling, a lot of warping, or having the paper peel off as easily. If you use just a chalk paint, just an acrylic paint, those hit that surface and they look fine. And they may even look fine the next morning, but then all of a sudden you'll start to notice that you're getting curling, you're getting warping, and likely even getting peeling there. So you can see how heavy those grains look, and I'm going to show you real quickly the difference. With this one, you see where these heavy grains are, and you'll see, I'm just going to use these spots to hold on to. This is going to feather that out some. It'll soften that grain. On a big piece, this is really nice. If you've got some graining that's a little too heavy, this wide brush with these soft bristles will help blend it out. You certainly can use your sponge. I just wanted this to be a very grungy kind of piece of wood. So I'm going to come in now and switch my browns out to my blacks. And I'm going to come in here with a little black. Let me get where you guys can see what I'm doing. So I've got, this is just the straight up ink color. This is chalk paint. And I'm dipping into this wax. I'm always going to keep wax in the mix with any of my chalk paints, any of my regular paints. It just helps it work this material so much better. And you can see this is already a really grungy look. So I'm just going to take my black sponge and I'm going to blend that in. The reason I did it that direction is it's going to blend some of that. It's going to pull that dark color all the way across here. And it's going to soften some of that heavy graining. Each little texture is going to give you a slightly different vibe on your piece. Now I'm going to take my little spots like this. I'm using more wax than not. You can see. I'm going to tap that off a little. It still has some black color to it. If you've watched my other videos, you know I like my edges, especially on vintage type woods. I like my edges darker. And I'm just pushing that wax paint mix down into these little indentions that I've made, little holes that I've made. Now, I want to show you something, and I just started using these other sponges, not so much to get my wood grain design, but for a couple reasons. This little Dollar Tree sponge comes in a 6-pack. The texture that they leave is not great. However, it does work really well when you're doing your edges, and it works really well in pulling off where you might have gotten too much. So let's say that you decided you did not want it this dark. So I'm barely dragging this across here. I've almost just got it sitting there. I'm not putting any pressure. So it's just sitting there and I'm sliding it. And you can see that it feathered that out, but it still left some of the graining. This does not leave a great grain of its own because it definitely pulls a lot of that paint off. But if you have places where you want that to happen, where you want to kind of correct where you might have applied too much product, it's definitely a good way to go. So my next step, really quick, I'm going to let this dry under my fan a little bit. My backer piece, I want to go ahead, you're going to see why I like this sponge for this. I'm going to go ahead and get a little paint on there and mostly wax. And I'm going to do these edges. This piece does not have to be entirely finished. This is just going to give me more dimension on this thing. And if you notice, it just does not shred like your good sponge. So it keeps your better textured sponge alive a little longer for you. And there's 6 of these in a package. So I'd much rather have the extra little sponge to the side to do these edges than to ruin my little bath sponge that has my nice texture to it. Okay, so one of the things I want to show you is on the edges of any of your pieces when you go to finish them. Always try to do this little bit of inner edge. Now the back side of this I'll finish out completely because I do like my fronts and backs finished it completely. It just gives a full clean look to me. But when you don't do just this little bit of edge right here, if you go to stack these and you didn't cut them perfect and there's a little bit hanging off, you'll be able to see that. So in order to prevent that, same thing on this side. If I was to go to put these together and they didn't line up correctly, you would still be able to see that little bit of lip there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the edges on this one. Hopefully I don't mess up the front too much. And I'm just using black since this is an already dark piece. You definitely try to get it to work with whatever wood look that you're going for. Just do your edges. Most of the time you can get this whole part done on these sides like this just using whatever was kind of left lingering on your sponge. And this is why my hands look so messy. I'm sure there are people out there that can find a really neat way to do this. And I typically am a very, very neat person. But this is the one craft that I almost get childlike when I do it. I find it really exciting. It definitely excites my creativity. And I don't mind getting a little messy when I'm doing it, which is really strange for me. But so you can see how much that looks like just an old dirty board that you went outside and picked up and brought in and started crafting on. Which for me, I like that look. That may not be for everyone. I literally can look out my dining window and see acres and acres of cows and pasture land. So I can get away with a really vintagey farmhouse look. It fits for where I live and how we live. So now you can see, if I did not line these up completely nicely, there's not going to be a whole lot of white peeking out at me anywhere that might kind of disrupt the illusion. So So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and adhere these together and then pull my stickers off for the great big giant reveal. I try to go as close to the edges as I can to get as good of a seal as I possibly can on these pieces. That is not always the case because usually by this point my hands are yucky. And I'm always worried about squishing them together and getting extra fingerprints everywhere. So, I'm going to try to do this without being a super mess. And I'm just going to push these seams together really well. It looks like I may have to go back in and touch up there, but that's okay. Now I want you to see, my alignment is not great right here. And you can see I need to touch it up with a little more paint. But if that was still white, it's hard to get paint down in those cracks, especially once you've got hot glue down there. So doing it this way, taking that little extra step, definitely keeps the idea that this is one real piece or one layered piece of wood. That definitely helps keep it in that illusion. And this is just my back side. I don't want to leave too many fingerprints behind. So, one last little detail that I like to do. I'm just going to take my makeup brush. I've dipped it in this mix of black and ink. Barely have it loaded. And I'm going to hit my edges and just shadow those a little bit. It almost adds to that 3D dimension that I want this thing to have. And this is not necessary, and it just depends on the wood look that you're going for. I just like to do this little bit on these vintage looking woods. And you can kind of see what that does. If you've got a spot that gets too heavy while you're tapping this in, same thing is with the other part of the surface. Take your little sponge that's not super saturated and tap off any extra paint. I'm not really wanting to tap off that much because I really do want this grungy look. So my next step is going to be, and you could almost leave these. If I had not put my fingerprints all over them, they would have this cooler effect. And it feels a little dimensional. And I'm not sure how well I seal these off with the clear. We'll find out. Get the big reveal with me. And here we go. This is pretty much all you've got left to do. I went in and sanded mine really lightly after I did this. Instead of having these bright crisp lines, I sanded it and got a more aged look to mine. And you can see one has the really crisp lines that are super bright. This one has the more aged vintage. Either one would work. I hope that this is something that you guys can enjoy and find some uses for. I think these are absolutely adorable. That may not be everybody, but I certainly think that it's a cute, novel idea. I hope you like it, and I hope you join me for a few more of these smaller scale projects.